Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep is a type of wild sheep that lives in the mountains.
There have been some times that I have just been blown away by what I've seen having to do with these sheep. One of them is in November one year, on Thanksgiving Day. Our family took a ride out Trail Lake Road, and we actually saw the rams hitting horns, and we were able to experience that. It was amazing and just something I'll never forget.
The lifespan of a bighorn ranges fairly widely because of factors such as the quality of the forage where they live and harshness of seasons, but you can say the broad span of average would be between 8 to 16 years of age.
Ewes typically in this neighborhood weigh around 150 pounds. Rams anywhere from 200 to 250. They have these massive horns curling out. Those things can weigh up to 30 pounds. Here in Wyoming, we have a number of different bighorn sheep herds that congregate in different areas for their winter range and their summer range. Our primary sheep populations are based in the western part of the state, primarily the Absaroka Mountain Range and the Northern Wind River Range.
The Whiskey Mountain herd is the largest wintering herd in North America, and they have about 900 animals in the herd. And 200 years ago, there were millions of bighorn sheep in the western part of the US. They went from Alaska all the way down to Mexico.
One of the first group of sheep to begin a population increase significantly was this Whiskey Mountain bighorn sheep herd.
We transferred over 1,900 sheep went to other places, many of them in the state of Wyoming, but we also sent sheep to 5 different western states.
So the bloodlines from this Whiskey Mountain sheep herd really are the genesis of sheep herds throughout a number of western states and repopulated sheep in a lot of Wyoming.
More sheep wintered in the Whiskey Basin herd right here next to DuBois than any other place in the world.
The current population is fairly stable. They've had recruitment difficulties because of the pneumonia outbreaks and some disease issues. The herd was probably at its peak in the 1990s.
Unfortunately, back in 1991, we experienced a pneumonia die-off in our Whiskey Mountain bighorn sheep herd. At that time, we believe we had approximately 2,000 sheep in this herd. Since then, we've lost over half of their numbers. We have focused our research efforts over the past number of years to determine if we can see what is exactly causing this lamb mortality, why our lambs aren't as healthy as they are in other herds, and have yet to determine a reason for that.
Through the seasons, I've noticed that they begin to come from the high country, from their summer feeding grounds in the fall, usually early November or late October, and it seems like they begin to pick out, want to pick out mates at that point. The males tend to group a little bit around the females. There's a little bit of rubbing, there's kicking, a lot of sniffing around, but no real rut action at that point. Later in the fall, when you get in and around November to December, is when the classic rutting begins to occur, the bashing of horns, the barrel into the sides and the rear ends of other rams.
Ideal breeding for them is in the fall, and so there's a synergy between when the breeding is optimum for them and when the birthing is optimum, and it's kind of nice among hoofed animals that actually it works out to fall breeding when they're in their best fitness for nutrition and for body build, and the spring when it's the best time when things are starting to grow for feeding young.
And then earlier in the new year, the rams that do not have a herd will get into what they call bachelor herds. So you'll see large groups of rams, 10, 20, 30 rams at a time, just congregating, not aggressive at all towards each other. As we get into the spring is when the lambing occurs.
The ewe's gestation period is just under 6 months, so the lambs are born between the beginning of May and the beginning of July.
You begin to see the lambs pop up, and you seldom see a ram at that point. It's as if the rams have kind of segregated themselves from the ewes who are having the lambs.
So after the lambs are born, they usually stay in seclusion with the ewe or the mother for a few days. The birth weight of the lambs is typically 8 to 10 pounds, sometimes as much as 12 pounds.
Typically, they're born up in very rugged country with lots of escape terrain, or what sheep consider escape terrain, which are these cliffy areas and big boulders. And that is obviously to prevent predation on those young as they're being born. Lambs, after they hit the ground, within a few hours are able to get up and walk around and actually hop boulder to boulder. So these are very precocious young that get up quite rapidly and are able to keep up with mom.
Another thing that we've seen is in the springtime, we've been able to see the lambs maneuvering on the rocks and just following their moms around and jumping from rock to rock, and it takes your breath away, but they do it, and they're amazing.
And then as we move into summer, all the sheep tend to move out of this low country and up into the higher ground of the Wind River Mountains where it's cooler.
The horns have a growth structure that's kind of cool because they'll actually, if you imagine putting paper cups one on top of the other, what's happening is a new cup or a new growth comes up underneath the previous growth, creates a little bulge which creates an annular ring, and that's essentially, if you were to stack cups, the appearance of the growth of a horn. The annular rings then are where the growth starts and stops between each of the successive years. It's made of keratin and other proteins, and so it doesn't fall off like deer and elk antlers would or moose antlers. They are horns, and so they are permanent growth structures that add on.
The force that they hit each other is about 40 miles an hour. So it's like two cars coming together doing 40 miles an hour. That's amazing that they can live through it. Their horns weigh about 30 pounds, and their heads are filled with cavities. They're filled with fluid that help cushion that.
Bighorn sheep truly are special with the density of their coat. They have a very dense underpelage that is there in the wintertime, almost like down. It's kind of fuzzy. And then they have very thick, hollow guard hairs coming up.
They've got hooves that are, look at first glance, very similar to deer and elk and moose hooves and cattle and sheep, if you will. But flip them over and look inside, and you'll actually see there's the hard hoof that avoids wear on the front, but they have a spongy, soft pad, almost like having a giant pencil eraser at the bottom of your foot. You know, that prevents sliding on the rock. So it'll act as not only shock absorber, but also prevent them from slipping. So their dexterity combined with that apparatus on their feet, they can leap in places where nothing else can catch them.
They need places to go when they're being chased by a predator, and they need food and water and a habitat.
Their first preference is for forbs. Their second choice would be grasses. Third choice would be shrubs. Even in the summer, a bighorn adult might eat up to 3 pounds of grass or the equivalent, so a significant amount of forage, because again, there still is a lot of coarse non-nutritive material.
Sheep in arid parts of the country maybe don't have access to freestanding water all the time. They can get by with very little water, and in fact they can get by without drinking for several days. When they do come by a water source, oftentimes they can drink a phenomenal amount of their body weight, perhaps 15-20% of their body weight in water to kind of rehydrate themselves.
Say there's a mountain lion chasing them. Yeah. Say they run. Yeah, they would have to run and try to find a place where the mountain lion couldn't get to them.
They have to have what's called escape terrain. They have to have rough, rugged, often vertical country to be able to escape predation and to be able to hide their young.
One of the biggest predators of bighorn sheep is our mountain lions. We also have some of the coyote and the wolf issue. There is the grizzly bears. In most areas right now, it's the mountain lion is our biggest predator.
There were probably 2 million bighorn sheep in North America, and today we have just a few thousand in the lower 48, and that's less than 5% of the population. Is because habitat loss and just use of landscape for other things.
Our biggest challenge for management of bighorn sheep populations these days is their susceptibility to certain diseases. Sheep have a real propensity for getting pneumonia, and there are several pathogens in the environment they can contract that can cause pneumonia, and it can cause big outbreaks in herds. As you can imagine, a group of animals that's as social as bighorn sheep in the wintertime, one animal gets pneumonia that can be transmitted to the rest of the sheep in the group, and it can be devastating for a sheep population.
So even though the disease issue is a really big challenge for bighorn sheep, there are many researchers and biologists that are working hard to try and to come up with a solution for this problem. Even facing those challenges, the Whiskey Mountain bighorn sheep herd is a really valuable asset for our community and for the world.
I was watching two rams early in the rut, and they were sniffing around and just following each other around. So I was photographing them, and the first ram crossed the river. He walked across, and I thought, hey, that's pretty neat. I want to get a picture, and I hope the second ram does the same. So I had my camera set up, and I waited, and about 10 minutes later, sure enough, here comes the second ram, and he gets to the edge of the river, and I'm expecting him to walk across, and he hunched back and tried to leap the river. Which made a great series of pictures. He, however, came up about 2 feet short. But to see it happen, and I've shown the pictures to other people who follow sheep, and they've never seen a sheep try to leap across a river. So it was a pretty good wow moment for me.
One of my favorite moments here at the Bighorn Sheep Center has been bringing the students here through the center and through the doors here to learn about bighorn sheep, and then out to Torrey Valley. We are only 8 miles from one of the largest wintering ranges of bighorn sheep in North America. We were out one time with a group of students from Fort Washakie, and we had driven up the valley in their school bus, and we were talking about habitat and biology of bighorn sheep. And as we turned around, unfortunately we hadn't seen any bighorn sheep. We came back down the valley, and there were 90 bighorn sheep right in near the conservation camp, and those kids were really excited about being able to see bighorn sheep finally. After this whole day of learning about bighorn sheep, they finally got the reward of seeing them.
The National Bighorn Sheep Center in DuBois, Wyoming is a place where people can come and learn about bighorn sheep. Through education programs, events, and outreaches, many people come and learn about bighorn sheep and can be inspired to conserve bighorns and their habitat.
This state is really important because of the wildlife and the scenic beauty. And I want to passionately help to take care of that so that future generations can have the same opportunities that I'm having.
We should care about them because they're native to here, and it's just like any other type of animal. They're fun to see, and they're important to different cultures that have lived here for a long time.